What if I told you the self-driving car is no longer science fiction? From autonomous vehicles to printed organs, from diagnostic AI to fusion power, the future's already here. These 5 technologies once lived only in our favorite films. Yet today they exist in the real world, quietly reshaping our lives. We watch them on screen, never questioning if they were possible. But the astonishing truth is that they have already become our present reality. So how far has Bumblebee's autonomous car actually come? You remember that scene in Bumblebee where the yellow Autobot rolls onto the battlefield, no driver, just pure autonomous precision? That's not science fiction anymore. Tesla, the American electric car company, has been selling vehicles with its full self-driving system since 2015, and the public beta arrived in 2020. This isn't a lab experiment. It's a commercial product you can buy and drive on public roads today. Consider the real-world account of David Lau, a California driver who took his 2020 Model S on a 40-kilometer commute using FSD. He documented that the system handled 99% of the turns and even overtook trucks by itself, yet he kept both hands on the wheel because the law demands it. The catch? One time, the car misread a lane in a residential area where the road markings had faded, a small but crucial flaw. Now here's the part that separates hype from reality. Experts at NASA and the US Department of Education suggest we evaluate such technology by comparing its current development level against a 100-point scale. So apply that yardstick to FSD and think about what that gap really means for the future of driving. If a system can master a highway but stumble on a missing line of paint, how close are we truly to just sitting back and letting the machine take over? Do you remember the glove Tony Stark uses to control his Iron Man suits from a distance? It turns out that concept has quietly left the big screen and entered the lab. A 2019 study from the Rochester Institute of Technology and the University of Arizona introduced a system that can genuinely grasp objects remotely. This floating, shape-shifting gripper interacts with things without a human hand physically touching them. It works like a magnetic field that you can tune and shift from a distance, allowing it to pick up and drop items. The team published their findings on Arxiv, showing a device that draws inspiration from that very cinematic moment. But what makes this different from the movies is its real-world purpose, particularly in rescue operations. How does this research help us save lives? The technology allows for safer manipulation of hazardous materials from a safe distance. That means first responders could potentially handle dangerous objects without putting themselves in harm's way. The application is clearly aimed at moving beyond the fiction of a hero's high-tech workshop and into practical life-saving tools. This moves us one step closer to a world where remote control isn't just about a device in your hand. And it makes you wonder just how different the future will look when these capabilities become standard. Remember that scene in Minority Report where Tom Cruise flicks through floating screens with a wave of his hand? It felt like a distant, impossible future back in 2002, didn't it? But what if that future is not only here but is now the standard technology you use every day? The touchscreen interface in that film has become the norm across the globe. Apple launched the iPhone in 2007, bringing the core concept to the palm of your hand. Then Microsoft Surface Hub in 2015, pushing it further with a large interactive display. But the real shocker, this futuristic technology wasn't invented in the 2000s at all. The first touchscreen was actually created back in 1965 at RCA Laboratories by a researcher named E.A. Johnson. That means the film was simply reviving a decades-old concept, and it wasn't until 2007 that the world finally caught up with his vision. How fast can an old idea become a necessary part of life once the timing is finally right? To verify claims like this, you need to check the data. For instance, if you hear a company has sold millions of units, you should look for their official financial reports. The pace of this adoption leaves us wondering just how many other sci-fi ideas are waiting for their perfect moment. You remember that moment in Star Wars, The Phantom Menace, when the damaged spaceship hull instantly regenerates, the hexagonal panels flowing back together like liquid metal. It's so visually striking that it etches itself into your memory. But here's the twist, that cinematic fantasy is no longer a fantasy. Scientists at the University of Illinois have developed what they call self-healing materials, and they're genuinely astonishing. Back in 2013, they created a system that uses a 3D printer to fill microcracks with a special carbon-based liquid. Within minutes, the material restores 100% of its original strength, completely erasing the damage. Think about the implications for a second. What if your phone screen could repair its scratches overnight, or an airplane wing could mend itself mid-flight? The mechanism works by embedding tiny channels filled with that healing liquid, which floods the crack the moment it forms. It's like giving materials their own immune system, a biological trait now achieved in solid objects. Compare that to the clunky, slow repairs we rely on today, and the leap feels almost magical. So the next time you watch a sci-fi battle scene, remember that the line between the screen and the lab is disappearing fast. But if a damaged hull can heal itself, could we one day print a replacement human heart? Have you ever watched a scene in Star Trek where Dr. Crusher regenerates a patient's broken bone with a flick of her wrist, and thought that was pure fantasy? That idea is now a scientific reality, but the breakthrough goes far beyond mending fractures. The real revolution is in 3D printing, where scientists are now building living human tissue from scratch. In 2016, researchers at Wake Forest University achieved a major milestone with their Integrated Tissue and Organ Printing System, or ITOP. This machine successfully printed ear, bone, and muscle structures, which were then implanted animals and matured into functional tissue. The secret lies in a special ink that contains living cells, which the printer arranges with incredible precision. So, they are not just creating plastic models. They are constructing biological structures that can survive and grow inside a living body. But what if you could print something even more complex, like a beating heart? A few years later, a team at Harvard University took this concept to a stunning new level. In 2021, they used their bioprinting technology to create a human heart tissue with functional blood vessels. This tiny heart patch actually beat on its own for 7 days in the lab, a mesmerizing sight that showcased the true potential of this field. The Harvard team even went a step further and successfully implanted the beating tissue into mice, proving it could integrate with a living system. This is not just a lab experiment, it is a bridge to a future where waiting for an organ donor could be a thing of the past. If we can print a piece of a heart that beats, what is to stop us from printing an entire one for a transplant? The idea of replicating bones like in those sci-fi shows now feels less like a story and more like a preview of the future of medicine, doesn't it? You remember the hosts of Westworld? Those lifelike machines that could almost pass for human? That unsettling blend of perfect skin and expressive eyes was pure science fiction just a decade ago. But here is the twist. That future is already here, and its name is a mecha. Built by the British company Engineered Arts in 2021, this robot doesn't just move its arms in stiff, mechanical arcs. It smiles, it looks surprised, it laughs in a way that feels genuinely spontaneous, and its face carries a level of detail that traditional robots have never come close to matching. At the CES 2022 Tech Expo in Las Vegas, visitors found themselves staring at a mecha completely captivated by its eerily human gaze. One attendee named Jeanette, who traveled from Texas, later told reporters that it took her a full 5 minutes to realize the machine wasn't a person in a costume. The way its eyes tracked movement and its facial muscles shifted was so convincing that she felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She admitted that the idea of having such a robot living in her house genuinely creeped her out, a sentiment that was widely covered by BBC and CNET at the time. Now, if you are wondering whether this is just a clever puppet show, the engineering behind it tells a different story. Each micromotor in a mecha's face is finely tuned to mimic the subtle contractions of human muscles, allowing it to pull off expressions like surprise and laughter without any of the jerky robotic movements we have grown used to. The body, admittedly, is still a work in progress, lacking the full mobility we saw in Westworld, but the face alone already crosses a line that seems to separate machine from living being. So, the question that lingers is this. At what point does a collection of metal and code stop being a tool and start becoming something we can no longer distinguish from ourselves? Remember the scene in Back to the Future Part 2 where a tiny fusion reactor powers the DeLorean's time circuits? That seemingly impossible piece of science fiction is quietly becoming our reality. The dream of clean, virtually limitless energy from nuclear fusion is being pursued on a colossal scale by the ITER project in France. This international effort, involving 35 nations, began construction back in 2010 and aims for first operations by 2035. The project's core goal is to demonstrate a fusion power gain factor known as Q equal to 10, generating 500 megawatts of power from just 50 megawatts of input. It's an audacious engineering challenge that pushes the limits of what we can build here on Earth. But then, on December 5, 2022, the landscape of energy research shifted dramatically. Scientists at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in the United States achieved what had never been done before: a net energy gain from a fusion reaction. In a historic experiment, the lab's lasers delivered 2.05 megajoules of energy to a fuel target, and the resulting fusion reaction produced 3.15 megajoules of output. This was the first time in history that a fusion reaction created more energy than it consumed, a milestone that the BBC and scientists worldwide immediately recognized as a turning point. The ratio of 1.5 times more energy out than in might sound modest, but its significance is monumental. So, how can we verify these extraordinary claims for ourselves rather than just taking a viral video's word for it? A practical approach as suggested in educational guides from NASA to consult primary sources like the agency's own websites or peer-reviewed articles in journals such as Nature. You can then assess the technology's maturity on a scale from 0 to 100%, placing early laboratory success far below a working power plant. This method lets you separate genuine breakthroughs from mere hype. This journey from science fiction to scientific fact isn't just about producing energy. It's about fundamentally reshaping our relationship with the planet. When we finally harness the power of the stars, will we have the wisdom to use it responsibly for the future of all life on Earth? Remember the moment in Back to the Future when Marty McFly steps into the DeLorean and it hovers just above the ground, suspended in mid-air? That scene felt like pure fantasy, a wild prediction of a future we'd never actually see. But here's the twist that might surprise you. The technology behind that image is not only real, it's been breaking records for years. The secret lies in something called magnetic levitation. A concept that sounds like science fiction but works on a beautifully simple principle of physics. By using opposing magnetic fields, a train can literally float above its track, eliminating friction and allowing for speeds that seem impossible for something touching the ground. It's a world where trains don't roll on wheels, they glide, and the implications for the future of travel are nothing short of revolutionary. When we look at what's already been achieved, the gap between that movie prop and our current reality becomes astonishingly narrow. The Japanese maglev train, for instance, recorded a staggering speed of 603 kilometers per hour back in 2015, a number that JR Central and Reuters confirmed as a world record. Let that sink in for a moment. A vehicle carrying passengers, not flying through the air, but hovering 10 centimeters above the track, moving faster than most small aircraft. That record wasn't a one-off publicity stunt, it was a demonstration that this technology is ready for prime time. The train uses powerful superconducting magnets to create both lift and propulsion, and the result is a ride that's smoother and quieter than anything you've ever experienced on a conventional railway. You're not just watching a train move quickly, you're watching a piece of the future that was once only reserved for the silver screen. So when you think about the next time you travel, ask yourself this: why are we still building trains that touch the ground when we've already figured out how to make them fly? In the 1979 film Alien, the crew wakes from cryosleep and steps into the med bay, where a glowing screen scans their bodies and instantly diagnoses their ailments. That machine, the autodoc, felt like pure science fiction, a fantasy of a future where medicine was instant and effortless. But a few decades later, we have to ask a hard question: did we actually build that thing, and does it even work? The first serious attempt was IBM Watson, a system marketed as a superhuman cancer specialist, yet by 2021 the product was pulled after recommending unsafe treatments. A doctor named SP at a cancer center in Seoul told Science magazine that Watson once gave a completely wrong plan for a 68-year-old patient, simply because it lacked data on an experimental drug. The irony is that while Watson failed, a quieter success emerged as Google DeepMind's AI detected 50 common eye diseases with 94% accuracy back in 2018. The lesson is that we built the autodoc, but we learned that trusting it blindly can hurt. So when you see a headline about medical AI, check the source twice before believing the hype. You remember the scene in Arrival where Louise Banks cracks the alien language and suddenly sees time differently. Well, we are not quite there yet, but automatic translation has taken a massive leap forward. Google's Live Translate now works directly through your camera and microphone, breaking down language barriers in real time. Launched in 2020, this tool supports 32 languages, which sounds impressive until you learn it is only accurate about 85% of the time. Does that mean we can finally travel anywhere without learning a single phrase? The remaining 15% of errors can still create some wonderfully awkward moments, like ordering something mysterious for dinner. But think about how far we have come from the days of pointing at menus and hoping for the best. This is not a distant dream anymore, it is a practical tool sitting right in your pocket. So the real question is not whether we can communicate, but what we will say now that we finally can. Remember the scene in Star Wars where Princess Leia's hologram pleads with Obi-Wan for help? That flickering blue image projected into thin air felt like the most distant sci-fi fantasy. Yet that vision is no longer confined to a galaxy far, far away, and you can bring it into your living room. In 2018, a Japanese company called Art Media transformed this cinematic dream into a commercial product, turning science fiction into a household reality. The system uses a smart camera and a special visor to project a life-size three-dimensional person directly into your physical space. Imagine video calls where your distant colleague isn't on a flat screen but standing right there, apparently inches away from you. It feels less like a phone call and more like a scene from a movie, a ghost-like presence that changes how we perceive communication. The technology naturally raises profound questions about the future of human interaction that we are only beginning to grapple with. We started this journey asking if the self-driving car from the movies had finally arrived, and the answer was a resounding yes. We have since traveled through a landscape where a glove from Iron Man can grasp objects from a distance, and where 3D printers build living human tissue. We have seen robots like a mecha mimic our very expressions and learned how fusion power, the stuff of Back to the Future, is inching closer to reality. The line that once clearly separated science fiction from our everyday world is no longer a line at all. It has become a blurry, permeable membrane that innovation pushes through daily. The sheer speed of this progress is staggering, with each breakthrough building on the last to reshape what we believe is possible. This isn't a distant future anymore, it is unfolding right now in labs and on our roads, and it invites a sense of wonder. So if a flying car or a talking computer from your favorite film becomes a reality next, will you be ready to accept it? Keep watching and share this video with someone who needs to see how incredible our present has become.